All right, so we've completed part 1, and now I'm going to just go over here, change that 1 to a 2. Boom, we're in part 2, controllers. All right, so notice what's in here. Adding a home controller, running the application, and adding a store controller. All right, I'm going to try to follow their directions as much as possible, but there'll be a couple things where we'll have to change certain things because of the way things have changed since this was written. All right. Now, they go into this, and one of the big things that Microsoft has done to try to make sure people want to use this is the idea is they're saying, when you do this, when you go out to a file, if you go out, for example, to even a rankin.edu, you're probably going out to rankin.edu.index.php or something like that. But you're going out to an actual file. And what they're saying here is that MVC for Microsoft does it differently. Rather than mapping it to a file, which is what we're used to, it maps it to a method. So that's why when you say like store or whatever, it's going to the index method of store. All right? And you say, well, that's pretty much what it was doing. No, it's not. Because that's the thing about controllers. As it says, when the URL is typed in, it goes right to the controller. The controller figures out what has to happen to it. Typically what has to happen to it, it has to call something, some model. That model will manipulate that data or get data or whatever in some way, will send the finished product back to the controller. Then the controller has to figure out, okay, what view do I have to use in accordance with what I'm working on? All right, and that's the whole thing. And that's really nothing new. I mean, we've looked at that before. So the first thing they want us to do here is to come in and add a new controller, which is a home controller. You should all know how to do that. So where we are in here, I'm just going to right mouse click on my controllers folder and choose add and choose controller. That's not new. You have done this before. All right, so right mouse click on the name of the project, which is MVC Music Store, choose add, and choose, not there, I'm sorry, right mouse click on the controllers folder, there we go, and choose add controller. That's what I wanted. All right, so right mouse click on your controllers folder, choose add, and choose controller. All right. Now we're asked in here, what kind of controller do we want to use? And I believe in this one also, they're asking that you choose an empty controller. All right, so go ahead and click add. We want this to be called home controller. So make sure you've got the word controller still in there. The word default should be highlighted. All right, so you want it to look like this. All right, and then just click add. What you should see then is right now, if you look quickly, our controllers folder is empty. When that gets done spinning, boom, now we've got homecontroller.cs in there. And it's important that you realize that that's all a controller is it's just a class, for lack of better words. All right, so it says this will create this for you, and what they show up on the screen here, or I should say in the handout that I've been going over with you, it's not identical, but it's darn close. All right, now a couple things, because we haven't talked much about the stuff that's in here. The using system, that's just a shortcut so that you don't have to, a lot of times when you use certain methods, if you didn't put system in there, you'd have to say system dot. All right, so it's a shortcut. That's why you use this. This generic thing that's in there, a little later, you're going to see something and it's going to say IEnumerable. And if you don't know what that means, it just means it can hold a lot of different stuff. It's a generic collection, for lack of better words. That's why we've got the collections generic here. All right. Link, we're actually going to look a little bit at some link in here. Link is line integrated query. It's Microsoft's way of being able to write SQL and use it in a little bit different way and use it on non-databases. I'm not sure why the web is in here, but I'm sure it's got a reason. And much of the stuff that you do in here, it'll have to use the system.web.mvc. All right. So if you look up on the screen here, this is what it says you should have. Well, when I looked at mine, it looked almost identical, except for whatever reason, they used to have 2 comment lines there, and now there's 1. But other than that, it pretty much is the same thing. All right. In fact, on theirs, it's got this. The only difference is on theirs, they've got a // there, and this one says home, and it's got /home/. Other than that, everything that we have is what they have. You don't have to change yours, but I just wanted to show you. So that really has not changed. Okay. All right. We're going to whip through this one. Believe it, it's short. We're already on page 4 of 10. All right, then we'll take a break. So, a couple things about this. First of all, I just want you to understand this. This is what's called a namespace. A little later on, when we do our using statements that are up here, we're going to have to put this namespace in there. You use those namespaces because, again, it can be a shortcut. So rather than you having to put in MVC music store .controllers .something, if you use the using statement, boom, you can just use it without having to say that. All right, so again, it's a shortcut. This is the name of our controller. If you don't know this, and you have to understand this because we're going to see this next semester too. This right there in C#, this means it is inherited from. So in other words, the home controller class is inherited from the controller class. All right? Child, parent. Just like you're inherited from your parents. Okay, does that make sense? Now, when we get, just so you know, just throwing it at you right now, when we say this next semester in Java, you'll say public class home controller, but you don't use the colon, you use the word extends. So every language has their own little nuances as far as how they do these things. They all do it the same way. And if you're still confused, look at it this way. If you look at inheritance as being like a big hierarchy, you've got something here that's called controller. And it's got a child, and that child is called home controller. And as we go on, we're going to make 2 or 3 other controllers. And they're all going to be children of controller. Controller has some stuff built into it by the language. Since we're a child of that, we can use all of that stuff that's been built in. All right. Now, they want us to come in, and the author even says this here. Okay, I want you to see this, because the author says, hey, we're assuming you know almost nothing. All right? So some of this may seem a little bit almost like we're taking a step backward, but I'd rather do that and be complete. So they're saying here, let's replace the index method with a simple method that returns a string. So in other words, if you look up on the screen right now, what we're saying is the name of the method is index, it has no parameters, and it must return an action result. So you should know by looking at this that view is of type action result. Does that make sense to people? All right, that's like saying here, if we said here public int index, we'd have to return here, that would have to be an int. It's the same kind of thing. So by default, view has to be of type action result. All right? Now, what I started to do, and I'm going to recommend you don't do this, but what I started to do is I said, you know what, every time I make a change, I'm going to take the old one that I had, and I'm going to just comment it out. So it's in there. And then I can remove it later if I want to. I'm not going to do that. All right. If we wanted to, I didn't have you save this yet because we didn't really do anything worth saving yet. But we'll do that before the period's over. So you can do it either way. I'm going to highlight this. and copy it to the clipboard. Then I'm going to remove this whole thing right here and replace it with that. That's all they want you to do. So either key that in yourselves or go to the handout that I gave you, and this is in part 2 of that handout. All right? Now, when we get done in just a minute, we're going to run this. And when we do, if everything works as expected, it should give us a little thing on the screen that says hello from home. Does that surprise anyone? Again, if you look up on the screen here, notice what we're returning. A string, right? See it in blue? We're returning a string. So, that's the string that we're returning. Does that make sense? So we've changed the method so it returns a string, not an action result. And we changed the return statement so instead of returning view, it's now returning hello from home. All right? Now, I'm going to tell you, like I said, once in a while I'm going to be telling you things that are not the way they are in the book. This is my recommendation. When you start making changes, if you look up on the screen, I would always click that double disk icon, which is a save all. And anytime we're doing anything that's of any merit, rather than just running it like this, I would always do a build solution first. I'm recommending that you do that. Well, I don't want to do that. Then you're not going to do it. All right. Technically, when you click over here, it is supposed to build it first. But this way, I'm making sure that when it runs, everything, all the incendiary file, all the files that are system files, they're all up to date. That's what the build does. It makes sure that your files are up to date and every other file is up to date. All right. So, from where we are right here, all right, I'm just going to go, now that I've done that, I'm going to click the green arrow over there and try to run it. And hello from home. You should get the same thing. If you get an error or something and you're like, I think I did everything right and I not get, then raise your hand. So far, just so you know, somebody tell me, MVC, what does that stand for? Model View Controller. Right now, we don't have a model. We don't even have a view. We're using our controller to do everything. Does that make sense? That's the most horse's ass way of doing this that you can, but the author is starting slow. All right, did you have a question? Oh, okay. All right. So we will be changing this as we go on. All right? So, all right, so we ran it, boom. The author talks about that random port number. We've talked about that before. I don't think we have to anymore. So the next thing it says we want to do here, I'm on the bottom of page 5, says we want to add, it says we have added a home controller that implements the home page of our site. Let's now add another controller that we'll use to implement the browsing functionality of our music store. Now if you notice on here, it says our store controller will have to do 3 things. First, it'll be a listing page that lists all the genres that we have in the music store. Second, there'll be a browse page so that if we want to just choose jazz, it'll show us just the jazz. All right? And third, we'll have a details page. All right? So if we click one of those albums, it'll show us the detail for the album. All right. So the author says, if you're still running the program, you should stop it. But I do want to say something before we do. You may or may not know this. In all the stuff that we've been doing in here, I think you'd agree with this, that you're either changing a .cs file, or like in the past, we changed an ASPX, or you're changing like a CSS file. Would you agree with that? You may or may not know this, but with this running, I can go back into my program. With this running, I can go back into my program, and for example, I could change the CSS file. Then I can come and save it. Then I can come back in here and just refresh, and I don't have to shut it down. You see what I'm saying? It'll immediately show me that. But anything that's in a .cs or a .aspx file, that's a code change. So if you make a code change, you have to stop it and start it again. All right? Again, now is that a big thing? No, but I just wanted you to at least hear that. All right? So I'm going to stop my run, and I'm going to go back into here and stop the run here too. And just like we just did a couple minutes ago, I'm going to right mouse click on the controllers folder, go to add, go to controller, all right? And this time we're going to add another controller, and that controller, all right, that controller, which will be empty again, will be called store controller. All right? So again, empty, click add, and this one will be store controller. All right? So when we click add, you'll now notice that we have two files over there. There's our home controller.cs and there's our store controller.cs. In fact, if I go over to the store controller, other than the name here, it looks identical to what we had for the other one when we started. All right, we're going to add a couple other methods to this in just a couple minutes. So we're going to have a total of 3 methods when we get done. We're going to have an index method, which we already have. All right, we're going to have a browse method, and we're going to have a details method. All right. They say in the book they're called controller actions. That's not really that big a thing, one way or the other. All right. But again, unless you like to type, you might want to go to the handout that I gave you, because the handout that I gave you has got this on it. You're either going to have to manually type that in, or you're going to have to copy it over. See what I'm saying? So I'm going to just grab this, copy it to the clipboard, come back to my store controller, and paste it in right there. All right? So in other words, when you're done, it should look like this. Let me make this smaller so we can see all of it on the screen at the same time. A little smaller. Come on. There we go. So that's what you should have when you're done. Again, not doing much. And again, this controller is acting as both a controller and a view. We have no model because we don't have any data yet. Get rid of that. So again, either copy that stuff over or put that in. All right, we're through page 7 of 10. Give me about 5 or 10 more minutes. I know we're going longer than we normally go, but then we'll take a 15-minute break. All right. So when you look at this, please look up on the screen. All right. If I right mouse click on here and I choose, well, actually, if I run it, and I go to /store, does it make sense to everybody? That's what should show. Does that make sense to everybody in here? If I run the program, but I go to /store, means from the store controller, if I just say store, it means find an index method and run that. All right, so I could either, and this is what we're going to do in a minute, you're going to run it, and then when you get to your port number at the end, you're going to put /store. All right, then this should run. It should say hello from store.index. Then try it again, but add the word index. And it should still say the same thing. Then go up there and change this to /store/browse. And when you do that, it should say hello from store.browse. Then change it one more time to /store-details. and it should say hello from store.details. Does that make sense to everyone? Because right now we're not doing a darn thing with data. All right, we're just writing some very, very simplistic methods. All right. Again, a couple of you might still be typing, so I want to make sure you've got that. But go ahead and save, rebuild the project, then run the project. All right, does everybody have that? All right, so I'm going to save. I'm going to do a build solution, and then once my green arrow comes back, now I'm going to run it. Now notice it's not at the store right now, so it's not running the store controller. It's running the home controller, correct? That's what it's doing, what it should be doing. So if you look up on the screen, what it's doing right here is the same thing as if I typed in this. Notice it doesn't change. Or as if I typed in this. See that? But what we want to put in here is we want to run this 4 times. First, we're just going to say store and hit enter. Now notice it says, hello from store.index. Then we're going to run this again, but after the word store, we're going to put in the word index, /index. And you notice it doesn't change. Then we're going to do it a 3rd time, and we're going to put /browse here. And notice how our message changes from hello from store.index to hello from store.browse. Then we're going to do it one last time, where we're going to put the word details there. And you can see that. All right. Now again, if I went through that too quickly, you're going to have some time. I'm going to give you 15 minutes in just a second to catch back up. All right. So the author even mentions on the next page, he says, well, that's great, but these are just constant strings, and that's all they are. So every time you run these, they're not going to change. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do, and let's put it in and then we'll talk about what it means, okay? So what I want you to do is stop the run if it's still running. Stop the run. All right, stop the run in here too. Go back to your code, and we're going to make a change here, a couple changes right here. All right, we want this right now. This is not being at all dynamic. Every time we run it, we're getting the same exact information. We don't necessarily want that. You know, that's like, yeah, I got a calculator here, but you can only add 7 and 3. Well, that's not what we want. All right, we want it to be dynamic. So we're going to come in here, and if you look, I'm going to update their comment and everything. So we're going to put in here. All right, I'm just going to put the whole thing in. I can probably make that bigger now. Put this whole thing in, and then we'll go back, kind of decompose it and talk about it in just a second. Notice once I put this in, if you look up on the screen, you see how the IntelliSense at least tries to kick in and help you? So whether you use that or you don't use that is totally up to you. But I'm going to go and grab it. Utility, dot, all right, and it wants me to use HTML encode. All right, so again, I can use that. All right. Now I'm going to put this over 2 lines. You don't have to, although you can. I'm putting it over 2 lines so that you can all see what I'm typing in. Doesn't look something we just did here. Thank you. And this should just be semicolon and return message. So go ahead and put all that in. All right, that's it. And we'll go and we'll try this in just a second. Let's. Again, you can put all this on one line, what's in the blue there, if you want to. I just put it on 2 lines so everybody can see what I've typed in. Okay. All right, you may or may not remember this because it's been quite a while. I guess it's been a year. But one thing that we talked about last semester, right back first semester, we created forms. All right? And when we created forms, one of the things that I talked to you about was that you wanted to make sure when you wrote a form, and for example, if you put in, so if I come in here and I say input type equal text, ID equals, first name, for example. Let's just leave it like that. So I've got my form. I don't care about the label. You get the idea, so you've got this. Right? That makes sense to everybody? What you don't want to allow the user to do is when they're putting a value in there, you don't want them to be able to put in script. Even if they just do this, if all they put in is this, script, alert, hello. If you ever go out to a site and they give you a form and you put that in there and it accepts it and it comes back with an alert box that says hello, that means they really did a really bad job of writing that form. Because I can write rogue JavaScripts now and I can put them in here and I can now have them run. I've tried it. You can do that if you go out to the right sites. All right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect this. Why am I telling you that? Because that's what this is doing. It is using HTML encoding. So when it sees this, it changes it so that instead of looking like script like that, it's remember those HTML entities? It does that. Those aren't executable. These are executable. So what it says is, hey, we're trying to make sure that you're not able to go in here and do anything. So we're doing HTML encoding. That's exactly what that stands for. And it's a hypertext transfer protocol utility. It's from that class, and it's that method. All right? So we're trying to write code that it's going to be hard for somebody to go in and do something they shouldn't do. All right? Now, you'll notice, anybody remember what that's called? Not a question mark. Anybody remember what that's called? What comes, the question mark and what comes after it? Anybody remember that? Remember the word query string? That's what that is. So the query string is genre equals, and that's what you're going to provide when you run this. You don't want disco, you want something else, it doesn't matter. But the idea is when you run this, when you run it the first time, I'm going to run it this way on purpose. I should get an error. All right? Why? Because I'm not going to provide it. I'm not going to give it a parameter. So it should fail, or else it'll give me nothing because I haven't provided anything. All right? So what we're telling it is we want it to say that we're in store.browse and the genre that we put in was that. And then we just return that. Does that make sense? Again, we're using the controller as both a controller and a view right now. We're going to eventually change that, but that for right now, that's what we're doing. All right, so again, I'm going to do a save all, build the solution, and then I'm going to run this. All right, again, it's going to say hello from home because it's running the home controller by default. All right, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go over to store. And, well, there's the index file from store. I'm going to try to go over to browse. All right, notice sometimes you get an error when you do this, sometimes you don't. Since it's a string, it's just basically throwing the empty string in there. Does that make sense to people? All right. But if I run it one more time, and now I have to put in here, because this is the way that it's expecting it, question mark, genre equal, they want disco. It doesn't really matter. All right. So that's the way that you should put it in. And hit enter, and there you go. So that changed. If that was too hard for you to read, that's where I am. They want you to put in this. /store/browse question mark genre equals disco. If there is a bad thing about what we just did, is that you have to put the question mark in there all the time and you have to say genre equals and then give it a value. That's kind of a pain in the butt. That's not really dynamic, again, in order to be able to do that. All right, so we're going to make another change. But for now, we'll leave that in there. We'll change the details method. All right, so if your program is still running, stop the run. Let's go back to it and stop the run here. All right, and then go over to your details method, which currently looks like this. This is going to be done in a similar way, yet it's going to be a little different. What I mean by that is when you are working in ASP.NET MVC, there's kind of a magical parameter that's called ID. So when you do that, you don't have to put the question mark, you don't have to do it with the query string. All right, so we're going to change this. We're going to change this in our details. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to have string message equals store dot details ID equals, I think I can get this all on one line, plus little ID. I don't know what the heck that did. I do know, but all right. And if you look up on the screen, because I forgot to show you that first, we got to put up here in our parens int ID. All right, then semicolon, then just return message. Okay, here's the easiest question you've been asked today. All right, so look on the screen if you would. Is that message and that message, are they the same thing? No. I don't mean are they the same kind of variable, they're both strings. But are they referring to the same place in memory? Yes or no? No? Why? Because they're local. We didn't make a variable at the top of our program that we called message. That could have been global. All right? So now what we're saying is we're going to pass in an ID, and that ID that we end up passing in here, all right, we're going to say that we're in store.details, and we're going to actually pass in and say ID equals. So if we run it and we give it a 5, for example, all right, And I'm getting an error because there what? There's no paren right there. I put in a right paren and no left paren. All right, does everybody have this? Yes? All right, save, build solution. When it comes back and you get your green arrow again, run it. So now notice, again, it's going to say hello from home. I'm going to go to store, all right, and it's running my store index, but I'm going to go from store, I'm going to go to details. See how I get an error? Now it needs something because it's expecting an integer. Before, since it was expecting a string and we didn't provide anything, it just said, oh, it's the empty string. There is no empty integer. So if I run this again and just put a number in there, they have you put in 5. It doesn't matter what you put in. See what we get? All right. So if you're confused over what we're doing, if it doesn't seem like it's making a lot of sense, you'll want to go back and read. That's why I've given you these things, because the material that's in here about what it's about, it's still the same. The syntax, how we put things in, may change a little between versions, but what we're doing in MVC 5 is the same thing the author was doing in MVC 3. Does that make sense? So far we went in and we created an MVC project. All right. We talked a little bit about the folder structure, and you said you already knew pretty much what it was about. All right. We learned you already knew how to use the developmental server, the local host, so there's nothing new there. We added 2 controller classes. So we added a home controller and we added a store controller, and we added some action methods to our controllers. All right. So before we finish up here, let's just do one thing, and then we will take a break. That is, let's go over here and click again on Team Explorer. All right. And then let's go over to Changes. So click on Team Explorer, and then go to click on Changes. And hopefully this is what yours looks like. And the system is telling you these are the files that have not yet been committed. Remember when I kind of gave you an ass backwards talk about Git, but we said that when you have these files, they get basically put in a call like a staging area. Then you had to run the commit command. Then they'll be committed. All right. Well, what's always recommended is you come here first and you click in the yellow box. You do this any way you want to. This is how I do it. So I'm going to come in here and say number 1. First thing we did, we added a home controller. Number 2, we added a store controller. Number 3, we changed the index method of the store controller. All right, I'm going to leave that there. I don't think there's any way that you can make this little window right here any bigger. You know, you can't. There's nothing here where you can stretch on it. I guess it'll take it there, but I don't think it does there either. All right. I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to put in 2 more lines. But I want to wait a second so you have a chance to type that in. And again, that's just internal documentation that you're adding for Git. All right, so we've got those first 3. I'm going to hit enter again. And number 4, I'm going to say, I guess it's just one more line we have to put. Changed the index method of the... In fact, I'm going to change it so it looks like this. Sorry. So we changed the index method of the home controller. Now we will change the index method of the store controller. All right, and finally, I guess it is getting bigger. That's good. we added browse and details methods to the store controller. All right, those are my comments. There is no way that everybody says, hey, do your comments and do them the way Jeff does them. You can put these comments in any way you want, but the more comments that you put in, the easier it's going to be for somebody to figure out what you did during this instance. Does that make sense? All right, some of you might still be typing. For the rest of you, just click the commit all button right there. Not the down arrow, just click where it says commit all. And everything will be committed when you get done. It's 1:55. Let's come back at 2:10, please. Thank you. Yes, not the down arrow, just where it says commit all. Thank you. bill says it's $79.